Welcome to the Rethink Leadership podcast with me, Jeremy Blaine. I interview leaders, experts and business professionals from around the world who are bringing leadership principles and know-how into the digitally driven 21st century workplace, with focus firmly on the how-to rather than the what. Each episode is in aid of a charity chosen by my guests, and since 2020, we've made donations to over 80 global and local causes. My guests for today's Rethink Leadership podcast are Sutton C, McCraney and Lace Flowers, the co-founders of the Flavour Room, an invite-only curated leadership ecosystem for founders and CEOs of colour operating at a higher standard. Drawing on Sutton's decade of military leadership and systems expertise, and Lace's 18 years at the intersection of food, mental health and human performance, they built a space that redefines access, authority and long-term influence in business. The Flavour Room centres leadership density, structural integrity and institutional credibility, prioritising standards over optics and sustainable power over performative success. Their work focuses on building lasting infrastructure that expands access and ensures it endures. This episode is in aid of the MATW Palestinian Fund as a thank you to Lace and Sutton for joining me. Find out more about how this organisation is helping with the Gaza crisis at www.matwproject.org. Well, Sutton, Lace, thank you very much for joining me. Please introduce yourselves and tell us more about the Flavour Room and why you both started it. Maybe we'll start with you, Sutton.
Jeremy, first of all, thank you so much for having us on the Rethink Leadership podcast. And hello to your lovely audience. Really appreciate this opportunity. So, as you just said, my name is Sutton. I am a leadership strategist, homeschool mom of four, United States Air Force veteran, and as you stated, the founder of the Flavour Room. So the Flavour Room really came from a place of lived experience and observation. I started my business a few years ago, and when I came online, something I was told over and over again is that I needed to network with people. I needed to be in rooms, get to know people, do that whole thing, which I was perfectly fine with. But when I found myself in so-called rooms, I quickly realized that I was always the odd person out, it seemed. I did not look like people in the room, did not talk like them, did not have similar experiences. So there was definitely a disconnect there. And from that, I kept thinking, okay, well, maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe it's my mindset. I don't know what it is. But then I observed that these spaces were kind of run all of the same way, shove people in a Zoom room, do a few ring around the rosy and exchange virtual business cards, and you're just left to chance. And considering these observations, I knew that I could build something 100 times better, but I was just not at that point in my journey to build it just yet. And so that was really the seeds being planted for, at that time, which I didn't know it, was the Flavour Room, this concept that I had in my head for about 3 years. And just quickly, the Flavour Room is an invite-only ecosystem for founders and CEOs of color who are looking to build at a higher standard. So I want to leave the story off there because it goes perfectly with Lace's story, and she'll kind of pick up where I left off.
Great, yes, Lace, please continue.
Thank you, and hello to everyone. Thank you for having us, Jeremy. So yeah, Sutton has left it there perfectly. So let me just introduce myself quickly. I'm the food person, as people like to call me, which sounds really simple until you understand what food actually means in the context that I bring it. I'm a British Jamaican mum. I am also a very passionate home cook, mother and founder, and I've been living in different countries since 2022, so it's 4 years now. I'm the founder of Empire Kitchen, which is nourishment and performance consultancy, with 18 years at the intersection of food, mental health, and human performance. And I co-founded the Flavour Room with Sutton. She's already told you what it is, and let me tell you why I decided to get involved. So for me, I have been floating around in the online space since 2016, and I have seen some things in this time. I have seen some things, and a lot of wrongs have been done to me, and I've wanted to right them for a long time. I have had a grand education in the racial bias and murky undertones of things that go on in the online space, and I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to do something about it. And when I did, I spoke up, I got vocal. I was actually told to be quiet by fellow entrepreneurs of color quite often as well. Like, don't talk about these things, sweep it under the carpet. You shouldn't bite the hand that feeds you. You're going to make us all look bad. Stop being an angry Black woman and all of these things. And I was like, hey, this isn't right. So I went quiet. I went quiet for a little while. Me and Sutton have been friends for almost 4 years now, and she has been with me through some of my hardest times. I got really sick when I was in Colombia, and had some really, really hostile clients. And she was there helping me to help myself, to lead myself through these really difficult times. So when she popped up in my DMs on August 7th, 2025 and said, hey, I've got this idea and I want to run it by you, see if you know anyone who's going to want to hop on this. And I was like, cool, let me know what that is. And when she told me the concept of the flavor room, I was like, hey, this has got my name on it. I want to jump in and get involved in this, because this is essentially what I've been wanting, to be able to build this table for us all to sit at, and for us to begin righting the wrongs that have been done to the both of us and many others. Because not only have you got that racial bias in there, but there was also a lot of the unethical things that go on in sales and business. And I've been bitten so many times, and I was like, hey, we can talk about this stuff and we can actually provide a solution. So that's why I got involved, because mainstream business spaces are not built for us. And I wanted to be part of the solution.
I totally understand where you're both coming from, and to have a network like that at your fingertips for people who are perhaps even now going through what you have both been through in the past is such a godsend, really. You can talk to people that have that lived experience that can help, like Sutton helped you a little bit there and brought you into this as well. Um, I'm also guessing that because you've had such a, all both of you have had such a varied background, you've had systems expertise, military, in the Air Force, entrepreneurial, food, flavors, kind of you name it. You've got all of that in the mix, which is a rich mix in that. So how, and if I continue with you, Lace, on this, um, how how has that, now you've started it, informed how it's evolving and where you lean into throughout your networks in the flavor room?
Yeah, absolutely. So my path's obviously less linear than Sutton's. And I think that's why I understand founders in our community so well. So I've been watching people for 18 years, and seeing what happens when they don't get the nourishment that they need, when they're not looking after themselves in a way that helps them to show up as they need to and lead. And I've seen this individually and as organizations. So the through line is nourishment. It's a leadership practice. It's not a wellness afterthought. And a lot of people have told me that nobody needs to worry about what they're eating, which I think is absolute nonsense. But I've been told this over and over again. So that really informs how I show up in the flavor room, because this is what I bring to it. I bring all of this knowledge, I bring all of this observation, and I help our members and support them to make sure that they're bringing this essential hidden system, something that people don't talk about, to their practice and how they show up and how they carry on in their businesses. And I've done a lot of things in my life. You know, I used to run a farmer's market from a caravan that I lived in the UK. Every Sunday, we used to create 40 meals and go and sell them at a farmer's market. And we used to do this in a double gas burner and a caravan oven. And that was it. We didn't have no plan, no investment, no nothing. So I think I bring that to the flavor room as well, because you don't have to have it all figured out. You know, you can really start where you are and go with what you've got and make it work. And that's exactly what I've done. And I also think that my background in mental health, I did mental health nurse training many, many moons ago. I think that allows me to be able to relate to people in a way that you might not be able to otherwise. And even that comes from a place of something that happened to me a very long time ago. I lost my first love to suicide. He had mental health problems I wasn't aware of. And that's why I went into that, because I wanted to be able to help people with their mental health in that way. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to, and I decided to leave after a near fatal car accident gave me my way out. But again, all of those things that I've been experiencing, watching, observing, and learning over the years, I bring that all with me. And I think that's what makes the Flavour Room really special, because between myself and Sutton, we have skills that you don't really see melded together very often. And they're certainly not things that you see given in most spaces.
Yeah, I really understand that. And you reinforce that lived experience being so important. So you're one half of that. So Sutton, to bring you back in, what is the path that you're driving within the Flavour Room, and what are you kind of bringing and bolting onto where Lace's focus is?
Well, Jeremy, I have playfully been called the Law and Order of the Flavour Room. And I think largely that stems from, my military background. And quite honestly, I don't think the Flavour Room would be possible without me spending, those formidable years of my life in the military, navigating certain situations and being thrust into others where I had to lead before I even knew what that really meant. And then stepping into entrepreneurship later, entrepreneurship gave me the skills to communicate with people in a way that there's still that authority established there, but I have that strategic understanding that a lot of people pay a lot of money to figure out, but I live through it. So I can bridge both worlds very, very well. And I think that adds to the structure of the Flavour Room, but also what our members get inside of the Flavour Room, because we are able to have conversations and have things set up in a way that wouldn't be possible, quite honestly, in other spaces, because there's just not that bridge of skill sets.
And that leads me to a very interesting point, actually, because I really like the fact that you're prioritizing standards over optics, sustainable power over performative success. And I'm starting to understand why now. Now you're both explaining this. So maybe I come back to you, Lace, and I'd like to therefore, in leaning into those areas that I've just mentioned, could you explain therefore the problem that the Flavour Room is solving here and why it's important for those people who join your network?
Yes, absolutely. So as we said, most business communities, spaces, places are not built for founders and leaders of color. They're either tend to exclude, tokenize, or ask us to assimilate, which essentially means we have to translate ourselves, we have to fold ourselves up into boxes that were never made for us, or even worse, completely ignore some of the things that we experience as founders and leaders of color, because we end up being forced to build in isolation, without peers who have a specific understanding of the weight that we carry, without access to those networks and that credibility infrastructure that others would inherit by default. And nobody in these rooms are actually willing to name what's happening. And that might honestly be because they don't actually know. And I get that, I don't think you can do that unless you have that lived experience, which we do have. So the Flavour Room solves the isolation, it fixes the standards gap and the access problem, all in one room at a higher standard for people who are done settling for less like we are. So the problem that we had is we've been confusing visibility for value, and for founders of color, that confusion is very, very expensive. Performative success looks like, it looks good externally. Oh, you've got all the bells and whistles and you're looking the business on the outside. But, the inside of the business is actually really hollow internally. And that's not doing anybody any favors, not you as the founder or the owner, and not the people that are receiving whatever it is that you're bringing into the world. So the standards over optics means that your infrastructure and your ethics and your delivery actually matches the positioning. And quite often we see such a disconnect in that area. Very, very recently, we've been seeing it a lot, and we've actually brought out something to help people with that. We'll talk about that later. So the cost of getting this, standards over optics wrong is really high when it comes to founders of color, because we have less margin for error. We have less institutional protection, so it's really on us to stand up and do it right the first time. So what I'm saying is we're not anti-visibility, but we are pro-substance behind that visibility. And now we're bringing that to a wider audience because we did a research paper, which people thought we were absolutely crazy to go and do, called Is It Legit? Redefining Equity, Leadership, and Influence in online business. And the subsequent framework that we've built from that, called the Legit Business Standards Frameworks, we're now bringing that into a wider context by bringing it in terms of DEI and ethics infrastructure to corporations through their leadership teams and their HR leads and leads of culture, because this is not just a small isolated problem, and it's not actually something that only affects online business, as we found. This goes way bigger. So we're solving it inside the flavor room for our members by being there as that support, as that real place where you can come and have them real conversations and be challenged to step into your highest leadership. Where we're also taking it further because we understand that essentially the entire business world needs what we're bringing. And, we're here to fill the gap that DEI was never really made to fill, because we're bringing it from a completely different kind of angle, because it's not just DEI, it goes further into the ethics and the standards. So, yeah, that's what I've got for you on that.
Yeah, it does strike me actually what you're doing here is a benefit for all leaders. In fact, what you're talking about, because so many are finding it difficult to get those right in the era of speed, transformation, all of those things. But I also understand it from the background that you've helped that explain around founders and leaders of color, and the fact that they haven't had a forum like this where actually you can talk openly, where you can support each other and so on. Maybe this is just an additional unfair question. So forgive me, Lace, but is there also a corroboration between not just, if you like, the founders and leaders of color, but gender as well, have you found?
Yeah, we have actually. Women seem to suffer, if you like, suffer more than men. Although, having said that, you find there's not a lot of spaces that actually include men, which is why ours does. Because everything's about, oh, empower the women, the women, the women, the women. And whereas, like the hidden systems that I looked into in this research paper tend to not only affect leaders of color disproportionately, but also inside that you're looking at the women being affected, especially when it comes to things like, hidden labor, childcare, elder care, family care, and all of that. But on the flip side, you've got the men out there who seem to have absolutely no spaces, like nobody cares about the men. So that's why we found it really important for us to say, hey, this is not a space just for women, as so many people seem to assume. This is a place for men and women because we're here for all of them. So yes.
Great, thanks for clarifying that. So let's assume then, though, we have people in your network there. We've got more founders and leaders now prioritizing standards, becoming more sustainable in terms of their own power and what that means internally as well. So Sutton, coming to you, for those who are getting it right from your experience in the flavor room, what are the benefits that you can share with others who are tuning in?
Jeremy, thank you for this question. And I think that the first thing comes to mind is more trust. There's a lot of skepticism these days, and rightfully so. Collectively, we are inundated in a massive scale with performance and fakery all around us. And someone stepping up and choosing standards in their business or, their profession over optics and performance, it immediately gives them a leg up and accelerates that runway to build trust. But it also helps with longevity in their businesses, because when you have that trust built, people are going to come to you and they're going to refer other people, to you. We always hear about that know, like, and trust, but especially now, this is how it's done. This is how it's done right. And then performance is costly, not only monetarily, but with time, energy to keep up appearances and a facade. I mean, this is why we see so many business owners talking about burnout. I mean, not even just business owners. A lot of people are talking about burnout, how it was just so taxing on their time and they were misaligned with who they are. Well, this is why. Because we are told if you want to make it, you got to fake it. You got to have this persona because that's what people want to see. But we're finding that that's not really true. So yeah, the costs of that are often not visible, and we don't hear about it until years later when people have, packed their bags and run for the hills.
Yeah, and that plays to that need, it feels like a louder voice for authenticity out there for founders and leaders, and being open about our vulnerabilities as leaders too, is that we're only human, right? But you're right, we're conditioned. Some, let's say, legacy leaders feel like they're conditioned to hide behind pride and ego, whereas actually you can become much more yourself and in the eyes of others when you can be a little bit more open and a bit more honest. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And as you were speaking, Jeremy, I was just thinking about my experiences in the military. This is anecdotal, but some of the best, because we're talking in terms of leadership, right? Some of the best output that I got from my people was when my sleeves were rolled up and I was in the trenches with them, right? Where I wasn't on my high horse, just dictating to them what they should do, but being the example of how to do it, right? That's when the trust was built, the loyalty was built, and we were able to perform better and achieve certain mission objectives because of that, because of how I chose to show up.
Yeah, now getting there is another matter, isn't it? We can talk about the what, we can talk about the benefits that come from it, but how you get there can often be difficult. But Lace, you mentioned the framework that you have both sort of brought to the table before. And I'd like to know more now from you around the focus on leadership, structural integrity, institutional credibility as, if you like, implementation pillars, because this is where it can either succeed or fail. So how do you do it, Lace?
Absolutely. So these are like the three pillars, like the three things you need to go think about, implement, and really start considering. So the first one you mentioned was the leadership identity. So this is the quality of the thinking and the decision making, and who you surround yourself with actually matters. Your vibe and your tribe, they belong together. So if your tribe is wrong, the vibe is going to be wrong. If the vibe is wrong, the tribe is often wrong too. So you've got to get these two things like connected. And also with that quality of decision making and thinking, you've got to be thinking about what you're putting in your mouth. How are you looking after yourself on a daily basis? How are you sustaining yourself? Because if you think like getting to the end of a busy day when you've been running on coffee and convenience all day, and it's like, right, now I'm going to go get me some Uber Eats, you're getting it all wrong. So these are things that need to come into that the consideration when it comes to the leadership identity. It's about the quality of the thinking and the decision making, who you surround yourself with, and how you look after yourself. Pillar number 2, the structural integrity. This includes your systems, how you're running your business, how is it set up, your agreements, the quality of those contracts that you're putting out there, and the things that you say as well, because your word is everything. Are you saying one thing and doing another? So your systems, your agreements, your operations, all of these need to match your values. They don't need to be a pitch deck. They're not supposed to be something that just sounds pretty on the outside. They need to match your values, and they need to match what you're putting out there. So that's number 2. Number 3 is the institutional credibility. This is how you're perceived and how you're trusted over time. And this is earned. You can perform it all day long. That doesn't work. This is something that is earned. So it's got to line up with those values. And when it does, you get it right. So these are not like abstract ideals. They show up in how you price, in how you hire, and how you show up in partnerships. And this is all part of our legit certification. We look at all of these things, give you the right questions to ask, so you can go ahead and make a plan and implement, which is essentially the capstone of the certification. This is not a tick boxing exercise where you go through and then you get a little smiley face and, yeah, I did the course. No, you've got to actually take these things on board, go make a plan and implement, and then have them evaluated essentially by the board, which includes myself and Sutton. So this is the foundations of the legit standards framework. And it comes from the evidence of the research that we did in our paper. This is not an opinion. This is not what we think. This is the real of the real. This is evidence-based. Because at the end of the day, implementation means absolutely nothing without a foundation. So we're bringing those foundations, and these are just 3 of the pillars of that foundation.
And Sutton, what would you like to add to that and kind of almost move forward from?
I would just like to add to the fact that, when it comes to having these things in place, there are so many lessons that can be learned from it just by having a structure. And as human beings, we are wired for structure. That is how we thrive, having some kind of, framework or whatever it is to move forward on. And so I think this really lays the ground to do that, as we've said, not only for businesses, because that's where we started, but on a larger scale with organizations.
I really see also from what you were saying, Lace, and what you were saying before, Son, it's very much a self-leadership element as well. It can be me as a leader in my community as much as at work. So much of this resonates as you're both talking about it. And it is that implementation um, uh, and that certification that you're actually doing it, which puts that measure in place. Am I reading that right?
You absolutely are.
Mm.
And this is where a lot of, DEI and other things kind of fell through the cracks,
Mm.
was because it was like, okay, here we have this thing. Yay, everybody be happy. But there was no follow through with standards, because that's the scary part. When we start putting things in place, that means people have to be what? Accountable. And nobody wants that.
Yeah, you're right, and I'm absolutely sure that many of those who are listening or watching this on YouTube right now be thinking, right, okay, I get it because I totally get what you're talking about here as well as a leader myself. And I suspect many leaders will be thinking I can do a lot of these things better, particularly when you go up a little bit and you start talking about how I was measured in a more performative way before. How does that shift now for the modern world? So, in the spirit of implementation, then, as we've been talking about, I'll come to both of you in turn, and maybe you first, Sutton. What are the 3 small right actions that we can all take, which might make the biggest difference? And if I ask you to answer that from a point of view of self-leadership, sort of my leadership itself, for leadership for self, but also leadership in the business for others.
Thank you, Jeremy. First, I would say assess your own leadership
Hmm.
and your values against how you show up in the world. I think that is huge, because as I alluded to earlier, we are in a time where we hear a lot of talk about leadership and authority, and there are, people showing up in places that are making it very clear to us that what they say is not actually what they're doing. So there's a huge gap, a gap the size of the Grand Canyon or the River of Thames for people to come in and fill that gap. So that would be the first thing I would say, is assess your own leadership and your values against how you show up in the world. The second one is to be honest with yourself about where you're holding back. A lot of us hold back. We hold back on taking the lead with certain things. We don't want to step on people's feet. We don't want to be seen in a certain way. It may feel like it's too much, but this is the time where you need to be too much, because there's too much at stake for you not to be. And the third thing is to seek opportunities and environments that force and challenge you into leadership.
Great. All 3 of those resonate, particularly from a self-leadership lens. So, Sutton, Lace, let me bring you back in here and talk about, okay, what would be the 3 actions of how I now focus more on getting it right, leading the business and leading others rather than just myself?
So I think I would like you to go ahead and name a system in your business that is running on assumption rather than intention. and look at this really clearly. Not next week, not next month, not next year. Look at it now, today, this week. Look at that. And I'm going to give an example, is because we see this one a lot. People who, business owners, leaders, whoever says, oh, I'm for everyone. Doesn't matter who you are, what color you are, all of those good things. I'm inclusive. I'm here for everyone. But then when the everyone, me, for example, comes along and has a look at your website, I don't see anybody that looks like me. I see all of these pictures of success that do not look like me, do not represent me. So I'm wondering now, are you just saying the good things that then brought me to your webpage, but I'm not seeing that reflected in the marketing? So that's one of the things that you may be assuming, oh yeah, well, I have no beef with nobody, but it's not showing that, this is for everybody. So take one thing that is running on assumption rather than intention, have a look at it this week. Number 2 is audit your inner circles. This is going back to what I said earlier, and it also echoes what Sutton said. Are they challenging you or confirming you? And answer that honestly, because like we said, your tribe and your vibe, they're interconnected, and you need to make sure that you have people who are challenging you, because if you just have a bunch of cheerleaders running around going, yeah, girl, you go do the things, that is wonderful, but that is not taking you where you want to go. And quite often it's keeping you stuck and it's keeping you small, and that's not going to help you get up and lead yourself or lead your business or lead the people that you came here to help. And the last one is choose one standard that you've been performing rather than living, and close that gap this week. And that might be a really hard thing to sort of look at and be really honest with yourself, but this is for you. I'm not asking you to write me a postcard and tell me what that was. You don't have to put it on social media. This is for you. This is personal. So you can really sit with that. And if you have somebody that you trust, you can ask them as well. And that's someone that you trust has to be able to tell you the truth. This goes back to, are people challenging you or confirming you? If you go and ask your biggest cheerleader, they're probably going to say, no, you're perfect, everything is fine. So choose one thing that you've been performing rather than living, and close the gap this week. And that is going to make a huge difference in your business, how you show up, how you lead in your business, and how you lead the people that you're here to help.
Well, that's 6 absolutely cracking actions that we can do between ourselves, our business, and others. So, in the spirit of keeping that going, then, Sutton, if I could come back to you and ask that, how do those who are tuning in, particularly founders and leaders of color, find out more about joining the Flavor Room and connect with you both to continue the discussion?
Thank you for asking, Jeremy. First and foremost, we have a big, beautiful website. So they can check us out at www.theflavor.biz, where we have all the information. We even have an interactive page for our research. So users can kind of decide how they want to read the research. It's all there. We also have our podcast, the Fully Flavored Business Podcast, which is on all the major platforms. They can access that through our website and, find the platform they prefer to listen on. And to connect with us, we're also on LinkedIn. My name, I'm the only one that exists. And I think it's the same for Lace. So pretty easy to connect and reach out with us there. And for anyone who's listening, we would love to hear how it goes with you taking these 6 cracking actions. Reach out to us, connect with us on LinkedIn, and let us know how that's going for you. We would love to hear it.
What a great call to action. And I caught there the big, beautiful website. I'm sure I've heard another leader talk about the big, beautiful something or other.
Well, this is real this time.
Yeah, that's right. Lace, anything to add?
No, I think Sutton's given you the lowdown. I'm like, did she mention a podcast? We have a podcast, y'all. We have the Fully Flavored Business Podcast, which she did mention. So go and have a listen, because it's unlike anything you've ever heard before. We talk about things that most people will not touch. And if you're like, hey, how do I get myself inside the Flavor Room? Again, go to that big, beautiful website, and there is a button that says get in the room. Click it and book a call, and let's have a chat and see if the Flavor Room is a good fit for you and a good fit for us. And if it is, we may well extend an invite.
Fantastic. Well, look, I have to say that has been such a rich conversation in terms of the what, the why, and the all-important how to. So Sutton and Lace, Best of luck on going with the Flavor Room, and thanks very much for joining me.
Thank
Thank
you,
you very
Jeremy.
much
We
for having
appreciate it.
us.
Thanks for tuning in to the Rethink Leadership podcast with me, Jeremy Blaine. Please like, comment and support us on your favourite platform, and subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch as well as listen to each episode.